few of them. So the goal here today is just try to make it better. So in this demo, what I'm going to show you is how you can use Claude on Google Cloud to build and deploy application end-to-end. And we will start from imagine the use case, right? Imagine the scenario. You are in an enterprise context. In an enterprise context, you probably have a team like the one that we are visualizing here that it's engaged to build a new feature or a new product. So starting from the left, you probably have a PM. Some of you in this room are PMs. And so these are kind of all the personas that in a simple way we can imagine are involved in the software development lifecycle. Now, with respect to these personas, Claude Code, the Anthropic's coding agent, augment all of them, providing several components that we are going to use today. So, as I said, for the remaining part of this presentation, I'm going to put the hat of all these personas. I'm going to show you how you can use these Claude Code components together with Claude on Google Cloud in order to build and ship a very simple feedback application that at the end of the presentation. At this point, probably you're familiar with this and you're wondering, okay, but what is different to use just Claude Code with Claude models? Why using Claude on GCP, on Google Cloud? So there are many reasons why you want to do this. So first of all, because you pay for what you use. So the usage of Claude models on Google Cloud is per token, so you don't receive a message cap. And also, if you're building an enterprise application that needs to go to production, you can always access to what is called provisioning throughput, which essentially will reserve some throughput for you in order to build this kind of application. The other important reason why you want to consider Claude on Google Cloud is, as I said, the setup is pretty straightforward using the ADC. You don't have an API to rotate or environment variable to set in some sense. So it's a happy journey with respect to this aspect. You can access model in your project with your own policies set. And also, the data stays in your project while you are interacting with the Claude Code. And models are served in multiple regions. So you have global endpoint, you have a regional endpoint, depending on the availability that you need. And as a Google Cloud, talking about availability, we have very great availability service standards that will allow you to use Claude and on one of the most performing infrastructure that you can find in the market. So these are all some of the main reasons why you want to consider Claude on Google. And so as I said, I will start wearing the hat of a PM. So imagine that you just join the company, or maybe you're already part of the company. You want to improve our services, you want to implement a new features with respect to a particular product. What was happening in the past is that you have the idea, you go to a UI UX designer, and you ask him to prototype and visualize the idea. Now, with the Claude and Claude Code, what you can do is just drawing a picture like the one that you see here, while you're drinking a coffee maybe in San Francisco, and then let Claude implementing the idea for you. So let's see this in action. So this is the Claude Code UI, you will probably be familiar with that, and you are familiar with the Claude MD, which is essentially gives some instruction. Here we just say that we are a PM, we want to have, starting from the picture, we want to render a prototype of the app, the wireframe, that we are going to then use and pass to the UX designer. And in a few minutes, you can see how Claude was capable of rendering it. And just starting from a very simple picture or drawing that you did while you were drinking your coffee. But in this case, I want to use an additional capabilities of Claude Code, which is the plan mode. So with the plan mode, what we do, we put Claude in a mode where it thinks it thinks and propose what it's going to do before to implement any code. And this is very important because it gives me like a degree of freedom of deciding to change something based according to my preference or according to some standard that probably I will get access through an MCP server using Figma, for example. So now that we have in mind what we are going to build, let's see this in action as well. So we started from the wireframe from the PM, similar prompt. I enabled the plan mode. And so as you can see, compared to before, in this case, I'm simulating receiving some instruction from Figma using a design doc. But as you can see, compared to before, it creates a plan of what it's going to do with respect to all the components that are defined in the slide. We look at them, we are happy, we accept, and Claude Code will implement all of them. And at the end, what we get is this optimized version. So as you can see, we start from here, and we get this. Luckily, it's not a problem, because as a Google Cloud, we invest a lot of time to integrate with this large vibe coding ecosystem that now is growing around models. And in the last few months, we released two important components. So the first one is the developer knowledge API with the associated MCP server. And the second one is the Google Cloud skills. So with the developer knowledge API, you get access to a fresh documentation from Google Cloud that can be directly consuming Claude Code through the MCP server. And it will have Claude Code to figure it out what is the best architecture, what is the best implementation to deploy a certain application on Google Cloud. This is very important because, again, what we are saying here is that you don't need to know like how to deploy an application on Google Cloud. You can just leverage Claude Code and this MCP server that we expose now on Google Cloud side to build application like this one. So in this case, probably what we are going to do is that we are going to deploy the feedback API on a serverless function like a Cloud Run. We will connect with a web-oriented DB like a Firestore to collect the raw responses that we will give through the feedback app. And then because we want to have that data analytics part, we will build the implementation in a way that we can store those raw response in an analytical data warehouse like BigQuery. And in BigQuery, we will post-process and we'll consume this information in a dashboard, in a dashboard like the one that you can find in Looker. And the skill part is, if with the MCP server, you will be able to design the architecture, with the skills, you will be able to cover the single blocks of this architecture. For example, we release a simple skills that enable Claude to deploy on Cloud Run, to deploy an API on Cloud Run, or to connect like Cloud Run with Firestore. So it's more about the implementation itself rather than giving the overall picture. So once you get Claude Code enabled with the MCP server of the documentation and the skills that I just mentioned, you can just directly implement the architecture that I was showing you before, and you can do this in parallel. So another component that you can use in Claude Code is sub-agents. And as you can see here, we are going to spin up 3 different sub-agents, one for the API, one for the ingestion pipeline, and the other one for the dashboard. And you can parallelize the implementation of each of these components, just like you run a team sprint in your normal, usual development life cycle. So let's see this in action as well. So here we are again. First of all, I just want to show you that we have enabled the MCP server of the documentation, and we have the skills, some of the skills that we pre-built. One time more, I provide a very simple prompt. The first step is designing the cloud native backend. So it will start like it will provide me draft of the architecture. In this case, I could use, again, the plan mode, but for simplicity, I didn't. And then he used the skill, one of the skills that I provide in order to implement the API. Let's say that we are happy with the API spec, then we have the architecture, we have the API spec. The next step is running multiple agents in parallel in order to implement the three components of the app that I was showing you. So it's pretty quick. As you notice, Code, like it also managed the testing part after you finish the implementation, and at the end, you will get your app. So at this point, we have the code of the app that is ready to be deployed. But because we are deploying on cloud and we want to open this app to a larger audience, we want to deploy it in a confidently. Like, so this is when you want to consider to run a security review. Now, depending on your company, you can have different security requirements. So, for example, you may want to check if your application is solid with respect to the most common OWASP issue, or because you are deploying this application on cloud, and one thing that you need to consider is probably you will use what is called a service account, and you want to limit the service account when it calls a particular API, like the one related to reading and writing a DB, with respect to certain role. So you're sure that you are limiting what it can happen when the application runs some operation on the cloud itself. So again, these are just a couple of examples of what you want to consider in a phase like this one. And of course, this representation is a strong simplification of what can happen in the real life. It's just one of the possible scenarios that you can have. And you can see why it's also a simplification, because we are letting the security engineer not only to approve if the app is secure enough to be deployed, but it will also deploy the app in this case. But again, this is just a demo, so we have this degree of freedom. With that being said, let's run the final demo, and let's get the app running. So in this case, as you can see, I use a pre-built security review that you can find in Code. Very simple prompt also in this case. And what is happening is Code run the first test. Essentially, he double check that everything is aligned. He found like a possible issue, and he automatically fixed it. So in a way that the app now is secure. And once it is secure, he deployed the backend API, and he deployed the API itself. So what we get at the end of this, it's an endpoint with our app. But the development lifecycle is still there. We have the last step to cover, which is essentially people there start using our app. If you saw, one of the KPI that I had on the dashboard was the response time. So how long is was taking you to just like providing a feedback. So these are the kind of information that you can use in order to like. Through this data, you can collect this data, analyze them, and generate insights in a way that they can be used in order to improve the application. Now, running, if you're new on Google Cloud, there are several services that you can use in order to analyze this data that comes from the app. So a couple of them, one, as I said at the beginning, is an analytical data warehouse, which is BigQuery. And for the reporting part, you have a tool like Looker. But again, as we said before, you don't need to know how to use BigQuery in order to analyze those data, as well as how to build a dashboard in Looker, because we also provide a MCP server for doing this. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to demo how to use an MCP server to query BigQuery or building a dashboard, but I want to quickly share with you where you can find this information in order to do that after this session, because we are going to release the code.